We look at some of the themes in the market in 2020. Working from home has been one of the obvious ones. Heck, I'm joining you every day from my home. And companies like Citrix have been at the center of that story. It's one of the better performing stocks on the S&P 500 this year. It's up about 25%. And there are different components to their business, but at the end of the day, helping you connect to your work from home is one of the key things they help with. And what's interesting is now we're wondering what this work from home phenomenon is going to lead to. Let's get some more perspective now from the CEO of Citrix, David Henshall, joining us. David, nice to have you back with us on BNN Bloomberg. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be here, John.
Let's just talk, because you joined us earlier in the pandemic and talked to us about some of the growth and activity your business was seeing early on during the pandemic. But now we're kind of stretching to this longer, where are we going from here stage. What's going on with the business today by comparison?
Well, I'll tell you from a business standpoint, if you take a look at our first half of the year, we've significantly outperformed both internal and external expectations. We just closed Q3 last night, and we'll be talking about that in a few weeks here. The reason behind that is actually pretty simple. You know, as you said, thousands and thousands of organizations around the world have looked at us for decades now, connecting people and information, allowing people to do that productively, securely, and in a more engaged basis. And so what we've realized during this pandemic, frankly, is that organizations are stepping back and saying remote work is in fact work. They've seen an increase in productivity. They've seen an increase in engagement and output of their teams. And it's leading to a fundamental rethink of work in general. I'd say prior to the pandemic, less than 10% of organizations had a fundamental, let's say, a flexible work strategy. Coming out of this pandemic, research is looking at somewhere between 60 and 70% of organizations. So I think the way we have defined work is definitely no longer a place, but much more of a measure of output, and giving people tools to be successful on their terms is going to be critically important going forward.
Really fascinating. I think it opens the door to a whole bunch of questions, including how we traditionally measure what's happening with the workforce. You think about things like productivity. What would you say? What are your learnings on how productive we can be working remotely versus actually being in the office?
It's actually a really interesting body of knowledge. And the background here is that the average person in an office building gets between 2 and 2.5 hours per day of uninterrupted work time. So they're really not very productive. And what we've seen during this period is that people now have much more ability to focus. They have the tools to actually get work done. That's one of the reasons why productivity has soared. One of the big challenges coming out of this is going to be breaking down these antiquated management models that have thought about work as a task orientation and being able to supervise and manage people physically. That's been changing prior to the pandemic, and it's really going to accelerate going forward. So rethinking management systems in terms of driving output, measuring team goals, much more so than effort or hours spent, I think is really the primary learning from a management science standpoint. And then when we talk about it from a technology point of view, what we deliver is really a set of infrastructure services to connect people and information, whether you're working in the office, at home, on the road, et cetera, and do it in a highly secured, highly managed, efficient way. And we continue to make people smarter by doing that. And I think that's the primary key.
I think that word smarter is pretty interesting, because we talk a lot about things like artificial intelligence as well, and highlight a lot of these big Silicon Valley companies that keep acquiring AI technology, building it into the consumer products that we know and use every day. So I would imagine you have to think a little bit about how that factors into the future. And in fact, you guys have been spending a lot of time thinking about AI's role as well.
Yeah, John, we've been leading the future of work and this whole narrative for 30 years now. And one of the things that we just completed was this broad work study looking at work in the year 2035 and trying to understand exactly how people and technology are going to work, together, and where that line is going to occur. So I think the takeaways have been pretty interesting. The first one is that, people will become more efficient through technology. Technology will make us smarter, will make us more engaged, will allow us to be more productive and more innovative. Fortunately, the Hollywood sensationalized version of robots taking over human jobs is probably not the case. So don't have to worry about that. but new job categories will be created. People that work with technology, that help manage and train the idea of robots, that help work on data privacy and trust. Those are brand new categories. And so this idea of reskilling the global workforce is going to be a continuing discussion that we need to have over and over again, because the level of capabilities will change. But areas like digital workspaces will allow people to remove much of that noise that happens in today's world, so you can focus on what's more important. In our language, we say giving people the space to succeed, because individually, people can accomplish some amazing things with the right tools and remove that noise so that they can focus.
I've been covering the financial markets for more than 2 decades. I can't ever remember a time where we've had so many thematic conversations taking place, and I think COVID has opened the door to all of those conversations, and they happen all the time in the stock market. Now, I mentioned what's happened with your stock, and I know you can't talk about your quarterly results right now, you're kind of in between quarters, but what's been the most common question that stands out for you, that you have received from high-profile investors in Citrix during this pandemic?
Yeah, when it comes to Citrix, I'd say the number one question I get is Citrix a COVID play or a work from home play? And I think that, there's a narrative out there that is actually pretty incorrect. This idea that people work in an office or they work at home. I think what we've realized through this entire pandemic is that, location is not synonymous with work. People need to figure out the right infrastructure, the right location to be most productive, depending upon this style of work. So most organizations going forward are adopting what we frame as a hybrid work model. You go into the office for those type of activities that are best performed in person: collaboration, innovation, expanding culture, and then you focus on getting work done wherever it's most impactful for you. So, we look at it as the digital workspace is fundamental infrastructure, whether you are working in an office, at home, on the road, or anywhere, because it simplifies technology from a human standpoint. It abstracts away a lot of this complexity and allows people to be more productive. But for IT, it's secure, it's managed, it's visible. So I think there's a continuum that's going to really be a thematic change in the workforce going forward.
Fascinating conversation, David. Thanks for joining us again. Nice to have you back.
Great to be here. Thanks, John.
That's David Henshall. He's the CEO of Citrix.